Sometimes the real storm doesn't come from the sky. It brews behind closed doors, where silence is power and control wears the mask of care. A distant rumble of thunder echoed above the expansive Radcliffe estate, casting eerie shadows across the gleaming marble floors. Inside, Isla Radcliffe clutched her pregnant belly, her heart racing as she braced herself for yet another confrontation with her domineering mother-in-law, Beatrice Radcliffe. It wasn't that Beatrice merely disapproved of Isla. She resented her entirely, treating her as nothing more than a disruption. Watching quietly from the far end of the corridor was Isla's husband, Nolan Radcliffe, a billionaire heir whose wealth could purchase any luxury in the world. Yet there he stood, frozen, as dark secrets and twisted control threatened the very woman he had sworn to protect. Isla Radcliffe often found herself reflecting on the first time she met Nolan's mother, Beatrice. It had been at a charity gala in Chicago, an event hosted by Beatrice herself in support of underprivileged youth in South America. At the time, Isla was an up-and-coming graphic designer with a passion for nonprofit work, volunteering behind the scenes. A simple misstep, a drop of champagne that landed on the hem of Beatrice's intricately beaded evening gown, changed everything. Beatrice's eyes had gone cold, her gaze sharp and unrelenting. Yet for Nolan's sake, she managed a forced, brittle smile and murmured, "Be more careful next time, dear." Isla had sensed the calculating chill in her tone. From that moment, she knew Beatrice Radcliffe was not someone to be taken lightly. Still, nothing could have prepared her for the cruelty that would emerge later. Months after Nolan had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance, lavish dinners in private rooftop restaurants, impromptu weekend escapes to Aspen, and moonlit walks along Lake Michigan, he proposed during a quiet evening in a vineyard in Napa Valley. Isla, breathless with love, said yes without hesitation, unaware of the darkness that would soon shadow their happiness. She had hoped that once Beatrice got to know her, the tension would melt away. But Beatrice had very different intentions. Now nearly 4 months pregnant, Isla was living under strict instructions from Beatrice to remain at the Radcliffe family estate for proper care. The estate, a historical gem tucked into the rolling hills outside Greenwich, Connecticut, featured vast, manicured grounds, a private reflecting pool, and a mansion equipped with everything from climate-controlled flooring to hidden stairwells once used during Prohibition. What should have been a serene retreat for an expecting mother had turned into an elegant prison. Before Nolan left for a short business trip to finalize an important merger in Tokyo, he hesitated at the door. "I don't want to leave you alone with my mother," he confessed, voice trembling. "She can be overwhelming. Promise me you'll call if anything feels off." Isla had smiled, wanting to seem strong. "I promise," she whispered, embracing him tightly. "I can handle a few days with her." But it didn't take long for the mask to drop. The moment Nolan's jet lifted off the tarmac, Beatrice's fragile politeness vanished. The pregnancy was not a joyous occasion in her eyes. It was a mechanism, a means of control. It started subtly. "You're too delicate to be wandering through the grounds alone," she'd remark. Or, "Are you sure you should eat that? It may not be best for the baby." Then it worsened. Beatrice began assigning Isla strict daily routines, odd rest times, forced traditional remedies, constant supervision, all under the guise of protecting the Radcliffe legacy. "Helena Moore, my private nurse, will be looking after you now," Beatrice announced one morning. "No more unsupervised roaming. Is that understood? Is that clear?" Beatrice's voice snapped like a whip. Isla blinked, stunned, her stomach fluttering with anxiety. "Supervision? Beatrice, I'm pregnant, not an invalid." She tried to reason. Beatrice's steely gray eyes narrowed coldly. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me. We are talking about my grandchild. You will follow my instructions." From that moment on, Helena Moore shadowed Isla's every move. Notepad in hand, she reported back to Beatrice at regular intervals. Isla felt more like a monitored child than an expectant mother in her own home. She could no longer trust the air around her. Every hallway, every whispered step of a staff member carried a sense of surveillance. Even the walls seemed to echo Beatrice's authority. Her freedom was no longer hers to claim. One evening, Isla's closest friend, Natalie Emerson, who had once traveled with her on a volunteer trip to rural Bolivia, arrived at the estate with a bouquet of soft pink roses. Beatrice intercepted her at the door. "I'm afraid Isla is far too tired for visitors," she snapped, not bothering to conceal the disdain in her voice. "Try another time." Natalie attempted to argue, but Beatrice's icy glare froze her in place. With a heavy heart, Natalie turned away, texting a short message as she left. "You okay? Call me if you need me, no matter what." Isla didn't see the message for hours. Beatrice had quietly confiscated her phone, claiming electromagnetic waves were harmful to the baby, and that it was for safety reasons. Isla sat in her room, staring out the window, her hands resting on her belly. Her silence wasn't peace. It was captivity. And as each hour passed, the walls felt closer, the ceiling lower, her voice smaller. Every moment of Beatrice's oppressive presence chipped away at Isla's confidence. She felt isolated, powerless. The Radcliffe household staff, from the groundskeepers to the kitchen crew, had worked under Beatrice for decades. Their loyalty to her was unquestioned. Isla knew that confiding in anyone would likely result in her words being relayed straight back to Beatrice. When Nolan returned from Tokyo, Isla rushed to greet him, tears welling in her eyes. But Beatrice had carefully arranged a grand welcome, an opulent dinner complete with a string quartet and a gourmet menu. She monopolized Nolan's attention with stories about the baby, future charitable endeavors, and how well she had managed everything during his absence. Isla barely had a moment alone with him before Beatrice pulled him away for a private discussion. It wasn't until 3 days later that Isla finally found the chance to confide in Nolan. In their bedroom suite, she whispered her concerns late at night, eyes darting toward the door in fear that someone might be listening. Nolan looked troubled. "I had no idea Mother was being so extreme," he admitted, his voice low and tense. "I'll speak with her, Isla, I promise." But the next morning, Beatrice confronted Isla in the library, her imposing figure looming over her. "I hear you've been telling my son lies, stories about how I mistreat you," she hissed. "How ungrateful. Need I remind you, Isla, that you married into this family?" Isla's pulse thundered in her ears. "I only told Nolan the truth," she said softly, one arm protectively wrapped around her belly. "Please, Beatrice, I don't want any conflict. I just need a little space." Beatrice's hand shot out, her nails digging into Isla's shoulder. "Keep your mouth shut, or you'll regret it," she warned, her voice laced with venom. Her eyes flicked down to Isla's belly. "You'll do as I say, or you might find this family has no room for you or your child." Isla stood frozen, shaken to her core. The threat didn't just echo in her ears, it buried itself under her skin. For the first time, Isla wasn't just afraid for herself. She feared for her unborn child, for the very soul of the life she carried. Isla realized the battle was just beginning. Her days at the Radcliffe estate were now consumed by a meticulously crafted routine. Meals served at strict times, enforced rest periods, and mandatory prenatal appointments, all orchestrated by Beatrice. Isla hadn't even chosen the doctors herself. Beatrice had an unnerving talent for disguising control as care, making every authoritarian decision sound like it was for Isla's benefit. "You'll be attending Dr. Halverson's clinic from now on," Beatrice announced one afternoon. "He's delivered generations of heirs for the country's most elite families. We don't need some underqualified public practitioner botching this." Isla's heart sank. She had loved her own doctor, Dr. Celia Ramirez, who advocated for a more natural and personalized prenatal experience, always placing Isla's comfort first. But Beatrice was adamant. And Nolan, perpetually absorbed in overseeing business expansions and corporate negotiations, often found it easier to agree with his mother than challenge her. That wasn't to say Nolan didn't care. He noticed the discomfort in Isla's eyes each time she was roped into another suffocating routine. He tried, gently, to persuade Beatrice to give Isla more autonomy, but Beatrice always deflected with wounded sighs, accusing Nolan of not trusting her years of maternal wisdom. Caught in the crossfire, Nolan would retreat, unwilling to create conflict, telling himself his mother meant well. But Isla knew better. Dictating her healthcare was just another way Beatrice tightened her grip. Isla longed for her cozy apartment back in Seattle, where she had once lived freely, creating brand identities and graphics for small businesses. Now she couldn't even step outside for fresh air without someone watching her. The gilded walls, the pristine halls, the carefully curated perfection, it was all a cage. And inside it, She wasn't just being controlled. She was beginning to unravel. What no one knew, not even Nolan, was that Isla carried a quiet, persistent fear beneath it all. Years ago, her cousin had lost a child in the final trimester. Isla had never forgotten the way grief hollowed her family from the inside out. That memory clung to her like a second skin, whispering worst-case scenarios every time Beatrice made a decision without her consent. It wasn't just discomfort Isla felt, it was a terror she dared not speak aloud. One chilly morning, she decided to reclaim a moment for herself. Wrapping a coat loosely over her shoulders, she slipped out a side door and stepped into the vast garden. Her heart pounded, half in fear of being caught, half in defiant excitement. The crisp autumn wind kissed her cheeks as she moved quietly along the rose-lined path, savoring the stolen freedom. That's when she saw him. A figure stepped out from behind a hedge, Victor, Beatrice's personal security guard. He nodded politely, though his tone held no warmth. "Mrs. Radcliffe asked me to bring you back inside," he said flatly. "She's concerned. The air is too cold for your condition." Frustration and despair welled up in Isla's chest. "Victor, I'm fine," she insisted, her voice barely steady. "I just needed a minute to clear my head." Victor's expression remained neutral, unreadable. "With all due respect, ma'am, if anything happens, Mrs. Radcliffe will hold me accountable." With a gentle but firm gesture, he guided Isla back toward the towering marble facade of the estate. The grandeur that once awed her now felt like the high walls of a prison. What had once taken her breath away now felt like the walls of a cage. That night, as Isla lay beside Nolan, she finally let the dam break. Tears streamed down her face as she poured out every indignity, every subtle threat, every imposed restriction. Nolan held her tightly, his expression a mix of guilt and quiet fury. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted you to feel like a prisoner. I promise, I'll fix this." But morning arrived, and the cycle resumed. Nolan confronted Beatrice in the breakfast salon. She greeted him with a carefully crafted look of wounded concern. "I'm only looking out for Isla's well-being," she said in a trembling voice. "Isn't that what any loving mother would do?" When Nolan pushed further, Beatrice's gentle mask cracked. "Don't question my devotion," she snapped, her voice steely. "Can't you see how delicate Isla is? Do you really want to put your unborn child at risk?" Nolan faltered. He loved Isla deeply, but he also feared that ongoing arguments with Beatrice might only heighten Isla's stress. Torn between the two women in his life, he froze, paralyzed by guilt and uncertainty. That evening, Isla gathered what strength she had left and called her friend Natalie on the estate's landline. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "I need to leave. I need help." Natalie's voice sharpened with urgency. "Don't worry, I've got you. Let's come up with a plan. I have a friend, Lena Harper. She works at a private pregnancy support center. If you really need to get out, she can help you find a safe place." "But, are you sure?" Isla hesitated. Could she really leave? And what about Nolan? She loved him. Part of her desperately wanted him to finally stand up to Beatrice with unwavering resolve. Was she strong enough to walk away without him? The question lingered in her heart like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, Beatrice's malice only escalated. One afternoon, Isla discovered her mother-in-law rifling through her private journal, pages that held her most personal thoughts. She gasped in disbelief. Beatrice didn't even flinch. "Don't keep secrets in this house," she said coldly. "I have every right to make sure your mind is sound for motherhood." That's when fear truly took root in Isla's soul. She started to notice the shift in how the staff treated her. Some looked at her with quiet pity, others with barely concealed disdain. It felt as if Beatrice had planted whispers, rumors suggesting Isla was unstable or even unfit to be a mother. Her days blurred into one another. Her nights were haunted by visions of Beatrice looming over her, hissing warnings about her baby, filling her mind with dread. She'd jolt awake in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, a silent scream lodged in her throat. Nolan tried to comfort her, but the strain in his eyes betrayed how overwhelmed he had become. He was torn between the love he had for Isla and the manipulations of a mother who had always controlled him. Could love alone be strong enough to sever the chains Beatrice had so tightly wound around them both? It was on a bitter Sunday morning that Isla realized Beatrice's tactics were shifting, from psychological warfare to something more dangerous. Something far more alarming happened. Isla had been in the music room, quietly playing a soft lullaby on the family's antique Steinway piano, hoping the gentle melody might ease her frazzled nerves. She was lost in thought when Beatrice appeared in the doorway, arms folded tightly. "Stop that infernal noise," Beatrice snapped, marching across the room. "You're disturbing the entire household with your nonsense." Isla froze, lifting her hands from the keys. "I'm sorry, I thought the music might." "It might do you well to remember your place," Beatrice interrupted coldly. "You think that because you married Nolan, you're truly part of this family?" she scoffed. "I've spent decades shaping the Radcliffe name, building an empire. And you? You come from nothing, some modest middle-class background, and believe you can just waltz in here with your silly, modern ideas?" She snorted. "My grandchild doesn't need the distraction of your hobbies. You should be focusing on rest and obedience." Isla's cheeks flushed with humiliation and restrained fury. Still, she stood from the piano bench, struggling to keep her voice calm. "I'm not trying to defy you, Beatrice. I only want a healthy, peaceful environment for the baby. That includes a little joy." "Joy?" Beatrice repeated with mockery. "You're an ungrateful child. You don't see the privilege you're wrapped in, living in luxury, dependent on my son's wealth." Something in Isla snapped. She was exhausted, her emotions raw and magnified by pregnancy. "I didn't marry Nolan for his money," she said, her voice trembling. "I love him. I don't deserve to be treated like a prisoner in my own home." Beatrice's eyes flared. She stepped forward, forcing Isla backward until her lower back pressed against the piano's edge. "Don't you dare speak to me like that," she hissed. "I've tolerated your insolence long enough." Before Isla could react, Beatrice lunged, grabbing Isla's wrist and twisting it violently. A sharp pain shot through Isla's arm, and she cried out. "Stop," Isla pleaded, her free hand cradling her belly protectively. "Please, Beatrice." That's when it happened. Beatrice shoved her. Isla's lower back slammed against the sharp edge of the piano. The shock raced through her body, her heart thundering in fear for her unborn child. She barely managed to catch herself, gasping as she steadied her balance. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Even Beatrice appeared stunned by her own aggression. But the look quickly passed. She smoothed a hand over her immaculate blouse and turned icy. "You'll keep your mouth shut about this," she warned, "or you'll regret it." Then, as though it meant nothing, Beatrice turned and strode out of the music room, heels clicking against the floor. Isla stood frozen, clutching her wrist, pain radiating through her arm. Tears streamed down her face, tears of shock, pain, and heartbreak. She sank slowly onto the piano bench, shaken not just by the physical hurt, but by the growing realization of how cruel Beatrice truly was. If she could do this now, while Isla was pregnant, what would she be capable of once the baby arrived? Isla knew she had to tell Nolan. But he had left that morning for a one-day trip to Boston for a charity luncheon, an event he couldn't avoid. By the time he returned late that evening, Isla was in bed, cradling an ice pack against her bruised wrist. Her eyes were red and swollen. "What happened?" Nolan asked, voice gentle as he stepped into the room. At first, Isla hesitated. She feared Beatrice's wrath. But the echo of her mother-in-law's cold glare and the ache in her wrist gave her strength to speak. "She hurt me, Nolan," Isla whispered, tears spilling from her eyes. She grabbed my wrist and shoved me into the piano. Nolan's face drained of color. "My mother? Are you sure it wasn't an accident?" Isla's expression shifted from hurt to disbelief. "She grabbed me. She twisted my wrist," she said, voice shaking. I'm terrified for our baby." A beat of silence hung between them. Isla's breath trembled. Deep down, she feared this moment, not just the recounting, but the possibility that he might doubt her. She'd been doubted before. And if Nolan didn't believe her now, she wasn't sure she could bear it. A wave of shame washed over Nolan's features. He reached out, gently touching her wrist, flinching at the faint bruise. Then he pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice thick with guilt. "I'll take care of this, I swear." The next morning, during breakfast in the grand dining hall, Nolan confronted Beatrice. Servants moved briskly around them, arranging an elaborate spread of fresh fruit, buttery croissants, and eggs Florentine. Isla stood quietly off to the side, heart hammering as she watched the encounter unfold. "Mother?" Nolan began, his voice calm but unwavering. "Isla told me what happened yesterday," In the music room. Is it true? Did you push her? Beatrice calmly set down her teacup, raising an eyebrow. What has she been telling you now? She asked with an exasperated sigh. That girl is far too emotional. She probably stumbled. You know how pregnant women can be. Isla inhaled sharply and stepped forward. I didn't stumble. You. Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. Don't be hysterical, Nolan. She turned to Isla, her gaze narrowing to a glare. What's next? Are you going to accuse me of trying to kill my own grandchild? Nolan's jaw clenched. He stepped closer to the table and planted both hands firmly on its surface. Mother, he said, his voice now steel. I don't care what excuses you think justify this. Don't you ever lay a hand on Isla again. The tension thickened, the room falling into a charged silence. Beatrice met her son's eyes without flinching. Finally, she sniffed and crossed her arms. If you choose to believe your wife's wild stories over your own mother, that's your decision, she said coldly. But everything I've done has been for this family's best interest. Nolan struggled to suppress the anger boiling inside him. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured. I love Isla, and I won't let anyone, not even you, endanger her or our child. Consider this your final warning. Beatrice said nothing. The silence between them stretched tight like wire on the verge of snapping. Isla felt her pulse thundering in her ears. And yet, buried beneath that pulse was something else, a quiet ache. She'd wanted this confrontation for so long, had imagined the validation. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief, for the trust she wished she had in Beatrice, for the family that never welcomed her. She wasn't naive enough to think Beatrice would simply back down. This confrontation, though necessary, was also an unmistakable provocation, and it might only fuel her mother-in-law's fury. After breakfast, Beatrice stormed off to her private study, slamming the door shut behind her. Nolan turned to Isla, taking her hand. Pack a suitcase, he said quietly. We're leaving the estate tonight. I'll book a suite at the Astoria downtown. We'll be safer there. A fragile breath of hope rose in Isla's chest. Really? You mean it? She asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his expression resolute. Yes, I'm not letting her intimidate you anymore, Nolan said firmly. We'll figure out a new place to live, maybe buy another property, somewhere she has no access to. This ends now. Isla clasped Nolan's hand, eyes glistening with emotion. At last, a small wave of relief washed over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt heard. Validated. Beatrice Radcliffe was still a formidable presence in their lives, but at least now, Nolan was standing between her and his wife and unborn child. The escape plan was simple. Isla would quietly pack an overnight bag with the essentials, while Nolan pretended he had an urgent business meeting in the city. They wouldn't tell anyone, not even the staff, who might unwittingly tip off Beatrice. Then they'd slip away in Nolan's private car, driven only by Marcus, his long-trusted driver. Late that afternoon, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the Radcliffe foyer, casting vibrant colors onto the marble floor. Isla clutched her small travel bag tightly, heart racing as she descended the spiral staircase. Nolan stood waiting below, tapping his foot with anxious energy. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, he projected the image of calm professionalism, though urgency simmered beneath the surface. He offered her a reassuring smile. Ready? Isla nodded, nerves taut, but deep inside, a tremor of fear curled within her chest. She had dreamed of escape for weeks, but now that it was real, it felt unreal. With every step toward the door, she half expected Beatrice to emerge from the shadows, to stop them, to end it all before it began. They moved quickly through the corridor, ignoring the curious glances from house staff. Outside, Marcus stood beside the black limousine, already holding the door open. He didn't speak. He'd been with Nolan for years and knew when to remain silent. But just as Isla slid into the back seat, a voice rang out behind them. Where do you think you're going at this hour? Beatrice stood in the grand entrance, her expression calm, but her eyes gleamed with suspicion. She stepped forward, posture rigid. Nolan turned casually. Mother, last-minute meeting in the city. Isla's coming with me. We'll be back tomorrow. Beatrice's jaw tightened. Why is Isla going with you? She needs rest, she said sharply. Nolan gave a nonchalant shrug, already stepping into the car. We won't be gone long. But Beatrice wasn't convinced. She moved closer, her eyes flicking to the small bag on Isla's lap. You're hiding something. she accused. Don't think you can just sneak away without telling me. I will not be excluded from decisions that affect this family. Before Nolan could respond, Beatrice lunged toward the car door. But Marcus, sensing the shift, swiftly closed it and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared. Through the tinted window, Isla could see Beatrice's livid face, mouth moving in silent rage as the car pulled away from the estate. She let out a shaky breath, only now realizing how tightly she'd been gripping her bag. Her shoulders sagged. It wasn't just the estate they were leaving behind. It was the fear, the suffocation, the constant second-guessing. The silence that had once meant submission now held a new meaning. Freedom. Nolan gently placed a hand on hers. You're safe now, he said softly. Though lines of tension still etched his face, the ride was quiet. Marcus asked for directions now and then, but mostly let the couple sit in silence. They arrived at the Astoria Hotel just as twilight blanketed the city. A uniformed doorman rushed to greet them, assisting with their bags. Within minutes, they were checked into a luxurious suite on the 15th floor, with a panoramic view of the sparkling city skyline. Isla stepped to the window, gazing out as her chest rose and fell with a long, uneven breath. I can't believe we actually left, she murmured, eyes wet with tears. Nolan's phone buzzed. Nolan glanced at his phone, his brow furrowed. 12 missed calls, all from his mother, his jaw clenched. I'm turning this off for tonight, he muttered. Let's just breathe. For once. They ordered room service, comfort food, tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and a simple side salad for Isla. For the first time in months, she felt a faint sense of peace settle over her. But guilt gnawed at Nolan. I should have dealt with this earlier, he said quietly, eyes lowered. I shouldn't have let her treat you like that for so long. Isla reached out, resting a hand gently over his. We're here now, and I'm grateful. Still, neither of them could fully shake the sense of dread that Beatrice's retaliation wasn't far behind. The next morning, Isla woke to find Nolan watching her, a troubled expression clouding his face. I don't want to just hide in a hotel suite, he said, voice low. I want something permanent. My mother's control isn't going to fade on its own. We need our own place, somewhere she can't just show up. He met Ila's eyes. Are you okay with that? Tears welled up as she nodded. Yes, I can't go back to the estate for the baby's sake. We need a real fresh start. Relief softened Nolan's features. I'll call my real estate guy, Trevor Wolf. He's helped me in the past. We'll find something soon. Over the following days, they toured several high-end properties in the city. Each apartment boasted modern amenities, top-tier security, and enough room for their growing family. Eventually, they found it. A penthouse in Tribeca, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace, and a cozy space that could easily become a nursery. Isla teared up just standing in the room. Nolan didn't hesitate. He made an offer on the spot. Meanwhile, back at the Radcliffe estate, Beatrice was far from idle. She flooded Nolan's phone with a barrage of manipulative messages. Some dripping with guilt, others laced with threats. How could you abandon your own mother? You're making a terrible mistake. She even attempted to contact Isla directly, leaving voicemails that swung between syrupy apologies and vicious accusations. One quiet afternoon, as Isla sat alone in the plush suite, her new phone buzzed. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw the caller ID. Beatrice. Against her better judgment, Isla answered. Her hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear. What do you want? She asked, her voice shaky. I want my son back, Beatrice hissed. You manipulative little thing. You think you can turn him against me with your sad little stories? Tears stung Isla's eyes, but she kept her voice steady. Nolan left because of your behavior. Beatrice's laughter was cold and sharp. You're fragile, Isla. Don't forget. You're pregnant. Stress isn't good for the baby. Are you sure you want to keep pushing me? A chill ran down Isla's spine. Is that a threat? Take it however you want, Beatrice replied flatly, and the line went dead. Isla sank onto the sofa, wrapping her arms protectively around her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the venom of Beatrice's words. When Nolan returned from a short business meeting, Isla told him about the call, tears slipping down her cheeks. Nolan's expression darkened. A muscle ticked in his jaw. That's it, Nolan said, his voice firm. I'm calling my attorney, Graham Henderson. We're filing for a restraining order. Though neither of them voiced it aloud, both Isla and Nolan feared the same thing. Beatrice was capable of almost anything to reclaim control. Word spread fast through high society circles. It didn't take long for tabloids to pick up whispers of a rift within the Radcliffe family. Headlines buzzed with speculation about the billionaire heir who had fled the family estate and his estranged, domineering mother-in-law. At first, Nolan tried to keep a dignified silence, but the pressure mounted. Fundraisers, galas, and business mixers, events where Nolan was once a welcome guest, now buzzed with hushed gossip. Guests exchanged curious glances, questioning why Nolan had left the Radcliffe mansion and was now living in a hotel with his pregnant wife. Beatrice, ever adept at manipulating the social narrative, wasted no time seeding her version of the story into these circles. She painted Isla as unstable and manipulative, claiming she was controlling Nolan for financial gain and carelessly endangering the future Radcliffe heir. Determined to reclaim their reputation and maintain crucial philanthropic relationships, Nolan and Isla decided to attend a charity banquet hosted by the influential Harrington family. Isla wore a simple but elegant gown that gently framed her growing baby bump. Nolan chose a perfectly tailored tuxedo. They arrived with anxious hearts, knowing all eyes would be on them. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the low murmur of sophisticated conversation. They had barely exchanged greetings with a few acquaintances, some offering polite smiles, others casting veiled looks of curiosity and pity, when Beatrice entered the room. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood Edward Radcliffe, Nolan's estranged father. Edward had long kept a distance from family affairs, choosing instead to travel constantly and rarely confronting Beatrice. Gasps echoed through the room as guests took in the split. Beatrice and Edward on one side, Nolan and Isla on the other. Beatrice approached with the bearing of royalty, preparing to scold a wayward subject. "How dare you humiliate me like this, Nolan?" she spat, her voice low enough to avoid catching the attention of official photographers, but loud enough for nearby guests to overhear. Edward stood quietly by her side, his expression tight and unreadable. He was not known for opposing Beatrice, and tonight didn't seem like it would be any different. Nolan took a step forward, shielding Isla slightly with his body. "We're here to support the Harrington Foundation," he said evenly. "We have every right to attend, and for the record, the only ones who've humiliated this family are those who allowed this drama to become public." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "You ungrateful child," she seethed. "After everything I've done for you." Before she could say more, a hush fell over the room. A man in a navy suit stepped forward. It was Harold Harrington, the host of the evening, accompanied by his wife Veronica. Having heard the tension brewing, they moved to intervene. "Is everything all right?" Harold asked, concern etched on his face as his gaze shifted between the Radcliffes. Beatrice quickly replaced her venom with a brittle smile. "Just a minor family misunderstanding, Harold. We wouldn't dream of causing a scene." Isla's heart pounded in her chest. She instinctively placed a hand over her belly, shielding her unborn child. This public confrontation was exactly what she'd feared, but it also felt like the moment she needed to speak her truth. Before Nolan could answer, Isla took a steadying breath and stepped forward. "I'm sorry for any discomfort this is causing, Harold," Isla said quietly. "But there's a reason Nolan and I have distanced ourselves from his mother. It concerns my well-being, both emotional and physical." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Beatrice's face turned to stone. "Isla, don't you," she started, but Harold raised a hand. "It's fine," Nolan interjected, stepping forward. "We appreciate your concern, Harold, but perhaps this conversation is better handled in private." Harold glanced at the curious onlookers, then gave a small nod. "You can use my study," he said, gesturing toward a side door. "I'd like tonight to stay focused on the children's charity, if possible." Reluctantly, Beatrice and Edward followed Nolan and Isla into the richly furnished study. The thick carpeting muffled the noise from the ballroom as the door clicked shut behind them. No sooner had it closed than Beatrice rounded on Isla. "You dare imply that I abused you?" she hissed, her voice quivering with rage. "Don't forget who holds the power here. The Radcliffe name is known across the world. You'll never escape it." Nolan stepped between them, fists clenched. "That's enough," he said sharply. "We're done, Mother. Edward lifted a hand in a weak attempt at mediation. Beatrice, calm down. Let's not turn this into a public disaster. But his voice held no conviction. Isla's eyes burned with the quiet fire she'd been building over weeks of mistreatment. I was forced to leave for the safety of my baby and myself, she said evenly. Beatrice has been manipulative, controlling, and yes, physically aggressive. We had no choice but to create distance. Her voice didn't falter. This time, she wasn't speaking from fear. She was speaking from a place of hard-earned truth. For the first time, she wasn't the woman trapped beneath Beatrice's thumb. She was the mother standing her ground. Beatrice let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh. You see what a liar she is, Nolan? You honestly believe I would harm my own grandchild? Nolan didn't hesitate. I believe Isla. She has given me every reason to. And you, he looked directly at his mother, have given me none. For a moment, the room fell into a tense silence. Then Beatrice turned sharply to Edward, fury in her eyes. Do something, she demanded. Edward opened his mouth, but all that came out was a tired sigh. You know how your mother gets, he muttered. Maybe Isla misunderstood. No, Nolan snapped, frustration finally boiling over. Stop making excuses for her. He turned to Beatrice, voice low but resolute. This conversation is over, and if you persist, we'll pursue legal action. A vein throbbed visibly in Beatrice's temple. She jabbed a finger toward Isla, her lips trembling with fury. You won't win, girl, she spat. You think you can turn my son against me? I've been building my influence for decades. You and your unborn child will face the consequences. Then, with a sharp flick of her designer shawl, she stormed from the room. Edward followed behind, casting one last defeated glance over his shoulder. Left alone in the study, Nolan wrapped his arms around Isla as she trembled. We should go, he whispered. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Isla nodded, tears glistening in her eyes but refusing to fall. It's okay, she said, her voice raw. I'd rather have the truth out in the open than keep living in fear. A few minutes later, they slipped out quietly from the Harrington event, ignoring the burst of camera flashes and the low hum of whispers that followed them into the night. Though the confrontation had been uncomfortable, Isla felt an unexpected sense of peace. She had stood her ground against Beatrice. She hadn't stayed silent. But now, a new question lingered in her mind. How far would Beatrice go to regain her power? Despite their attempt to break free, her presence loomed over every corner of their lives. Nolan's phone buzzed constantly with calls from unknown numbers. The messages that came through ranged from threatening to manipulative. Warnings of leaked lies about Isla to the tabloids, or schemes to entangle Nolan's business in layers of legal red tape. Some were little more than thinly veiled blackmail. If Nolan didn't return to the Radcliffe estate, Beatrice would cut funding from key philanthropic initiatives or freeze access to trust funds that supported important research efforts. Their newly purchased penthouse in Tribeca became Isla's safe haven. She spent her days pouring energy into creating a serene nursery, determined to welcome her baby into a peaceful, loving space. Meanwhile, Nolan juggled meetings, coordinated with security consultants, managed his legal strategy with Graham Henderson, and still found time to plan a joyful baby shower, hoping to surround Isla with warmth and support. Yet beneath it all, tension still simmered. Isla often found herself gazing nervously out the penthouse windows, scanning the street below as if Beatrice might send someone to snatch her back. Every unexpected knock at the door set her heart racing. She had begun waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her hand instinctively cradling her belly. Most nights, she didn't tell Nolan. He was already fighting so many battles for her. She didn't want to add another weight, but the silence grew heavy. And some mornings, she found it hard to rise from bed, guilt gnawing at her that maybe her fear was hurting the baby. About a week after the showdown, Isla's friend Natalie Emerson stopped by with a basket of homemade muffins. They sat together in the living room, city lights stretching beyond the glass. Natalie kept her voice soft, aware of Isla's fragile emotional state. I've been looking into some things, Natalie began, sipping tea. Lena Harper, remember her from the support center? She told me about a few high society families where controlling in-laws tried to interfere in custody. We need to make sure Beatrice doesn't try to claim you're unfit to raise the baby. Isla tensed. Could she actually do that? With her influence? Natalie said cautiously. If she lies or manipulates the right people, yes. Panic prickled beneath Isla's skin. She thought about the private journal Beatrice had read, the estate staff who might side with her if offered enough money. I need to protect myself, Isla whispered. I have to document everything. Even saying it aloud made her feel more in control, like she was reclaiming something, however small, after so much had been taken from her. Natalie nodded. Exactly. Record every call, message, visit. You still have Dr. Celia Ramirez, right? She can verify your health and mental state. That afternoon, when Nolan returned from a meeting, Isla told him everything. Together, they began assembling a file. Timestamps of threatening voicemails, screenshots of texts, and Isla's written account of the physical altercation in the music room. Nolan handed it over to Graham Henderson, who quietly began preparing for potential litigation. A few days later, a letter arrived at their penthouse, sent by certified mail. Isla's hands trembled as she opened it. It was from Beatrice's lawyer. A formal notice, accusing Isla of mental instability and negligence. The letter implied that once the baby was born, Beatrice might petition for legal guardianship. It claimed Isla was unfit to raise an heir to the Radcliffe name. Isla's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the words on the page. She handed the letter to Nolan, who turned pale as he read it, rage slowly overtaking his expression. This is war, he muttered, crumpling the letter in his fist. I won't let her do this. Not to you. Not to us. They contacted Graham Henderson immediately. The attorney advised them to prepare for the worst. While it's difficult for a grandmother to obtain custody under normal circumstances, he explained, your mother has deep resources and connections. We need to compile every shred of evidence that Isla is emotionally stable, physically healthy, and fully capable as a mother. That same week, Nolan discovered that several members of the board at Radcliffe Enterprises had received anonymous complaints, clearly orchestrated by Beatrice, questioning his leadership and business decisions. She was attacking from every angle, hoping to destabilize him professionally and emotionally. She's coming at us from all sides, Isla whispered one night, curled up in bed, her arms protectively wrapped around her belly. Nolan sat beside her, taking her hand in both of his. We'll stand firm, he said softly. She may be powerful, but she won't break us. Yet, as the weeks passed, Isla saw a shift in Nolan. He looked thinner, worn down by the constant barrage, corporate pressure, legal threats, and the responsibility of keeping Isla and their unborn baby safe. She worried the strain might take a toll on his health or cloud the joy of becoming a father. Sometimes, late at night, she would find him standing in the living room, gazing out at the glowing skyline, phone in hand, his face drawn and distant. Nolan, she said one evening, wrapping her arms gently around him, we're going to get through this. He turned, exhaustion deep in his eyes. I never imagined my own mother would become the enemy, he whispered. It's surreal. A part of me still wishes we could fix it. But I can't let her near you. Not after what she's done. Isla pressed her palm to his chest. You're doing the right thing, she whispered. Our baby comes first. And despite the weight of Beatrice's threats, small pockets of peace emerged. Together they assembled the crib, painted the nursery walls a gentle, calming shade of pale yellow. They attended prenatal appointments with Dr. Ramirez, who reassured them that the baby was developing beautifully and praised Isla's steady health. Every afternoon, they made time for a quiet walk through a nearby park, holding hands, sharing stories, pretending, just for a little while, that life was normal. Still, the fear never fully left them. Beatrice could resurface at any moment, tampering with hospital records, bribing medical staff, or simply appearing uninvited at their door. They were dealing with a woman who had no boundaries, no hesitation in destroying her own family to gain control. Tension reached a peak as Isla entered her third trimester. That was when Dr. Ramirez made a new recommendation. Keep her stress levels as low as possible, Dr. Ramirez advised. It was sound medical advice, but in the face of Beatrice's relentless vendetta, nearly impossible to follow. Despite Isla's best efforts, her anxiety began to spike. She experienced occasional bouts of high blood pressure, and Dr. Ramirez warned that if it continued, complications could arise. One late afternoon, as Isla rested in the living room of the penthouse, a sudden tightening gripped her abdomen. Fear surged. Was she going into early labor? She breathed slowly, waiting for the pain to pass, and it did, but the experience left her shaken. It was a harsh reminder of how vulnerable she and her baby truly were. When Nolan learned what had happened, he took immediate action. Graham Henderson filed for a formal restraining order against Beatrice Radcliffe, citing harassment, intimidation, and documented physical aggression. The evidence was substantial, and the court moved quickly, scheduling a preliminary hearing. On the morning of the hearing, Isla and Nolan arrived at the Manhattan courthouse, nerves taut. The modest stone building buzzed with lawyers, court clerks, and anxious families. Isla wore a simple maternity dress. Nolan, a muted gray suit. Their goal was not to impress, but to show the truth. In the hallway, they passed Beatrice, already flanked by a powerful legal team. Her attorney was rumored to have deep connections within the judiciary. Beatrice gave Isla a sharp, venomous glare as they walked by. Edward Radcliffe was nowhere in sight, perhaps unwilling to witness what his family had become. The hearing commenced without delay. Graham laid out their case, detailing the harassing messages, medical evaluations from Dr. Ramirez, and photographs of Isla's bruised wrist from the incident in the music room. Isla trembled slightly as she took the stand, recounting the mental torment and physical aggression she had endured. Nolan sat just behind her, fists clenched, eyes glassy as he listened to the woman he loved relive every painful detail. Then it was Beatrice's turn. She spun a narrative portraying Isla as a manipulative outsider, a gold digger with fabricated injuries. Her legal team submitted signed statements from staff at the Radcliffe estate, claiming Isla had frequent mood swings and staged confrontations. Many of those staff members, of course, had worked under Beatrice's thumb for decades. The tension in the courtroom grew thick. Isla's heart pounded in her throat. Her hands were clammy. She wanted to flee, but Nolan's hand in hers kept her grounded. After hours of testimonies and cross-examinations, Judge Delgado, a composed, stern woman, called the courtroom to order. She reviewed the materials carefully, her eyes shifting between Beatrice and Isla. "This is not an easy case," she began. "Family matters rarely are. However, based on the evidence provided, voicemails, text messages, medical records, it is clear that Miss Beatrice Radcliffe has acted in a manner that a reasonable person would find threatening and harmful." She continued, voice unwavering. "I find no substantial evidence to support Miss Radcliffe's claims of manipulation by Mrs. Isla Carter Radcliffe. The testimony of a state staff is inconsistent and contradicted by photographic and medical documentation." Beatrice's attorney attempted to interject, but Judge Delgado raised a hand. "Enough," she said firmly. "The court is inclined to issue a temporary restraining order against Miss Beatrice Radcliffe. She is to remain at least 200 feet away from Mr. Nolan Radcliffe, Mrs. Isla Carter Radcliffe, and their child once born. This will remain in effect pending a full hearing." She added one final stipulation. Should Ms. Radcliffe wish to pursue custody, she will be required to undergo a psychological evaluation. A surge of relief flooded Isla. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes as Nolan exhaled a shaky breath and reached for her hand. Beatrice, however, remained rigid with rage. In a final, venomous act of defiance, she pointed a trembling finger at Isla. "You'll regret turning my son against me," she hissed, her voice echoing through the quiet courtroom. Her attorney moved swiftly to silence her, but the damage had already been done. The words lingered, like poison in the air. "You'll be removed if you don't control yourself." Judge Delgado snapped, striking her gavel. Court is adjourned. Escorted by security, Beatrice stormed out of the courtroom, her fury radiating in every step. In stark contrast, Isla and Nolan stepped into the corridor, a lightness rising in their hearts. For the first time in what felt like ages, the weight had started to lift. Michelle was waiting just outside and rushed forward, wrapping Isla in a tight hug. "You did it?" she whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "You stood your ground." Nolan turned to Isla, his eyes filled with both sorrow and admiration. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through," he murmured, resting a protective hand over her round belly. "But I swear, starting now, I'm fully committed to keeping you and our baby safe." Isla nodded, blinking back tears. In that moment, the courthouse's cold marble and harsh lighting faded from her awareness. All she could feel was the warmth of Nolan's touch and the steady, fluttering reminder of life within her. A promise had been made. and for the first time in a long while, she believed in it. They weren't naive. The restraining order was a significant win, but the journey wasn't over. Beatrice could still contest the order at a final hearing or find other ways to interfere. Still, for the first time in months, hope flickered. That evening, back at their penthouse, Isla and Nolan shared a quiet dinner, clinking glasses of sparkling cider to the future. The emotional wounds left by Beatrice's cruelty would take time to heal, but Isla felt something she hadn't in a long time: faith. Faith in her own strength, in Nolan's love, and in the tiny life growing inside her. In the weeks that followed the court's ruling, a fragile peace settled over their lives. Beatrice was legally forbidden from making contact, and the silence that followed was almost surreal. No more angry calls in the middle of the night, no more venomous messages from her lawyers. Yet Isla remained watchful, half expecting Beatrice to find some backdoor method of retaliation. Dr. Ramirez closely monitored Isla's health, recommending gentle exercise, rest, and a calm, supportive environment. Without the daily weight of Beatrice's presence, Isla's blood pressure stabilized. Her health began to thrive. She threw herself into finishing the nursery, carefully folding baby onesies, hanging soft pastel prints on the walls, and lining drawers with baby essentials. Nolan matched her enthusiasm. He read parenting books, practiced swaddling with a teddy bear, and eagerly asked Dr. Ramirez questions at every visit. By the 8th month, they hosted an intimate baby shower in the Tribeca penthouse. Close friends like Natalie Emerson, Lena Harper, and a few of Nolan's trusted colleagues gathered to celebrate. Balloons floated above bouquets of flowers, and laughter echoed through the once tense space. It was a day of joy, a beacon of celebration after months of fear and turmoil. As they sipped fruit punch, Lena leaned closer and asked gently, "Do you think Beatrice might try something once the baby arrives?" Isla met Nolan's eyes. They exchanged a look. "We can't rule it out," she said softly, "but we have the court order in place, and Nolan's attorney is ready if she tries anything." Nolan nodded, placing a hand on Isla's shoulder. "We're also upgrading the security system here. Cameras, alarms, just in case." The room quieted briefly, the shadow of Beatrice's threat lingering, but only for a moment. Soon enough, the baby shower resumed with games and glowing smiles, genuine excitement buzzing for the child who would soon enter their world. As Isla's due date approached, she and Nolan finalized plans for delivery at a reputable private hospital, another layer of safety for their growing family. Dr. Ramirez was set to oversee the birth, ensuring that everything would proceed with minimal stress and maximum care. Due to past concerns, the hospital administration implemented special security protocols. Beatrice's name and photograph were discreetly circulated among staff to prevent any unauthorized access. Early one morning, Isla awoke to sharp labor pains that steadily intensified. Nolan, though meticulously prepared, fumbled in his nerves, nearly forgetting his phone while grabbing the hospital bag from the nightstand. Luckily, Natalie arrived just in time to help. She offered soothing words and gently ushered them to the waiting car. City lights flashed by as they sped toward the hospital. Despite the contractions, Isla leaned into Nolan's arms, filled with both anxiety and anticipation. They were on the brink of a life-altering moment. Inside the quiet of a private hospital suite, Dr. Ramirez guided Isla through each contraction, calmly instructing Nolan on how to support her best. Hours stretched on, each wave of pain pushing Isla closer to the edge of her strength. But she never let go of Nolan's hand. His voice was a steady anchor, whispering encouragements, brushing her hair back, pressing soft kisses to her forehead, and promising their child would arrive into a world of love. Then, at last, a newborn's cry pierced the room. Their baby boy, delicate and perfect, announced his arrival with a wriggle and a strong set of lungs. Tears streamed down Isla's cheeks as a nurse placed the newborn gently against her chest. Nolan, overcome with emotion, pressed his lips to Isla's temple. "He's here," he whispered, voice cracking with awe. For a few minutes, the world slipped at the tension, the threats, the sleepless nights. All of it faded into the background. All that mattered now was the tiny heartbeat against Isla's chest and the warm embrace of their new family. The next day, word of the birth spread through their social circles. Isla and Nolan had welcomed a healthy baby boy, Theo Carter Radcliffe. Messages of congratulations poured in, some from heartfelt friends, others from business associates eager to stay in Nolan's good graces. But one note stood out, a single card delivered by courier, no return address. Nolan opened it cautiously. Inside, in familiar, looping cursive, were the words, "Congratulations on your little one. He'll always be a Radcliffe. Don't forget that." No signature. But they both recognized Beatrice's handwriting. Isla's hands trembled as she set the card aside. Then she looked at Nolan, cradling their son, his expression firm, protective, loving. "We're together," he reminded her gently. "No matter what she does, we protect our family." Isla exhaled. The fear might never fully vanish, but the love she held for her husband and newborn son was infinitely stronger. The first chapter of Theo's life would not be overshadowed by Beatrice's cruelty. They had broken the cycle, building a future not shaped by the Radcliffe legacy alone, but by the love and protection they gave one another as a family. A new dawn had arrived, and with it, a fierce hope that the wounds of the past would heal beneath the light of their unbreakable bond. Thank you for following the emotional and powerful journey of the mother-in-law who tormented a pregnant wife while the billionaire watched it all. Isla's courage in the face of Beatrice's cruelty proves that love, truth, and perseverance can stand against even the most entrenched family power plays. In the end, Isla and Nolan discovered that strength isn't found in wealth or legacy, but in the fierce loyalty to protect one another at any cost. Dear friend, life will often test us in the quietest hours, not with grand battles, but with subtle cruelty that creeps into our everyday breath. What Isla endured was not just a tale of defiance. It was a mirror for anyone who's ever whispered, "This isn't fair," and felt unheard. Like the Stoics taught, we cannot control the cruelty of others, but we can master how we rise in response. Isla's strength wasn't loud. It was in her trembling voice when she finally said, "No more," and in her choice to protect love over legacy. In choosing peace over pride, she didn't just save herself. She saved the future her child will inherit. Let Isla's story remind us, sometimes the strongest act of all is choosing to begin again, unafraid. If this journey moved you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It helps us bring you more stories that heal, empower, and inspire.